So there's answers. There's answers to all this stuff. I put up these two things. You guys, some of you probably already seen the film, at least one of them, Flow. There's another one, Blue Gold, which is very similar. And the reason why I put it up after that last slide is because they give the holistic view of a water justice movement, right? It's not just about the bottled water, but bottled water leads to all the other questions. Access, poverty, destruction of water resources, all of that sort of stuff. And that's what these films talk about. And I think when people walk out of these films, I was there when they were being screened at Van City Theaters in Vancouver. It's really funny, right? So like we have a table outside, and people going in, they don't, they're like, oh, Council Canadians, whatever, they walk in. Coming out, there's people that stand at the table for about a half an hour, and they're like, oh my God, what am I going to do about this? So it is a crisis. It is serious. It doesn't mean that we need to like hang on to water like as Canadians as our resource. It should be shared. It should be provided to the world, but it should not be done on a market. It should not be done by private entities that are going to profit off of it, right? Like justice truly means equal and proper access for people. And those films will talk about that. So unbottle it, what will it lead to? Blue Communities Project is something that the Canadian Union of Public Employees and the Council of Canadians has launched, which basically says that once cities start talking about bottled water bans, you go to them and be like, okay, you're not just going to get away with that. We have this thing called the Blue Communities Project, which actually means that you as a city council will not only ban bottled water, you will declare and respect and understand water as a human right, and also support and provide funding to properly support your public utilities. And looking forward, some of the things that aren't in this report, in this project, but like things that people are talking about already, are stuff like drinking fountains, are stuff like protecting watersheds, which I talked about. And an interesting thing that's coming up throughout BC right now, and it'll eventually come to the Lower Mainland, is water metering. Williams Lake, Kamloops, Lillooet, Comox, Kelowna have all come across this issue. And this is where it gets really tricky, right? Because then the people that want to profit off of water start becoming environmentalists. So they come and say to you, well, we want to conserve water, so we think we should be metering it, so the municipality, by metering it, will discourage people from using too much. Again, remembering that 80% of the water is consumed by industry, right? But yet they want to meter people's homes. But in addition to that, metering is an open door to privatization. Because metering, even if it's done publicly, it basically commodifies water, right? But, so the question comes to me, like, I usually say that, and people are like, but what about conservation? Don't you care about people wasting water? And I'm like, yes, I do. And what you can do is you can have municipal bylaws. So for example, Kamloops, I don't know if folks have been to Kamloops that much, but it's a desert climate, essentially, right? Why the hell do people in Kamloops have green lawns? Right? Like, pass a bylaw that says you cannot, like, basically have lawns in Kamloops. It's okay, right? Like, people, like, kids will find maybe have a field somewhere, one field, kids can go play there, but kids can also play on the street. Like, street hockey is a great game. So that's the thing, right? Like, again, all these issues come out. Like, as soon as you start talking about one thing, everything else comes out. So, Blue Communities Project, if folks want more information, it's available on the website. Part of a global movement. It really is a global movement now. I don't know if you guys saw a truly, truly inspirational movement in Bolivia when the water utilities there were going to be privatized, and there were mass mobilizations throughout the city. Meant a lot to me just seeing that it was led by the poor indigenous people of that country. Evo Morales, who's been elected as the first indigenous president of that country, a lot of that came out of this movement. A lot of that came out of people being empowered to say that, listen, we can do things, we can make decisions for ourselves. The movement in India I was telling you guys about, against Coca-Cola, it's spread, it's in Varanasi now, it's in Rajasthan, it's in Kerala, all over the country. Palestine, huge issue, right? Like, people in the West Bank, like, one of the biggest political points of the Israeli-Palestinian struggle is the access to water, right? Like the Israeli government is basically trying to secure all of the water from the West Bank for Israeli use. And the people that are living in poverty in the West Bank and in Palestine aren't actually having access to that water. People like Jimmy Carter have talked about the conditions of Palestinians in that territory. And then, like I mentioned, BC, right? We have a lot of issues in BC, and people don't actually talk about them. So bottled water starts it off, but like we have, for example, the independent power projects that are being proposed across the country, which are basically going to put rivers and streams in pipes to produce power. They say it's for our use, but technically it's for the mining industry and all sorts of other industries. But one of the things that was really interesting was that the biggest IPP project on the Butte Inlet, just on like north of the Sunshine Coast, there's 12 applications for bottling water in that exact same inlet. 12 applications, right? So like this is like it's like this is the beginning of that fight. This is like it's going to be a big fight. It's going to be serious. But we're there already. Like it's not like we're telling people. There's already people on the ground organizing around this, and it is a part of the global movement. So little quote there from Meta Parker, who's been organizing this around this, and you know, again, realizing that like, you know, farming, washing your clothes, all of this stuff, these aren't the issues around water conservation. It's really about the bottled water industry and other industries. It's just a beautiful picture. Life, farming, you know, the way we get our food is also dependent on water, right? When like farmers have to, like especially peasant farmers, small farmers, have to start paying for water because of metering just to water their crops, it's another huge issue, right? Like, I mean, technically, people have been farming for millennia, and that shouldn't change. So the last thing, which I just put these two pictures up, a black bear playing in the water in BC, and a hippopotamus yelling out in Africa. One of my closing remarks, so we had a debate with this guy from the C.D. Howe Institute, and some people said I was being rude because he was going on and on about the economy, and I was trying to interrupt him, being like, this is about water, when we talk about water. And one of the really interesting things was that the basic question that I asked him at the end was how do you expect the animals to pay for water? Right? Like, is a hippo gonna go buy a bottle of water? Like, no, I don't think so. And that's what it also comes down to, right? Like, commodifying water, bottling it, putting it on the market, and saying that this is the way to go is not really respecting a holistic view of what our world actually is, right? Bears aren't going to pay for it, deer aren't going to pay for it, all sorts of animals aren't going to pay for it. And we need to protect it, but the bottled water industry has demonstrated in India, here in BC, in Ontario, that they're not the best people to protect the water resources. They're about consumption, they're about consumerism, and that's where I'm going to close. Now, so that's the end of the presentation, but the hope is today, because we have some amazing folks already working on the issue in here, is just to also engage in a bit of a dialogue about what you guys think your barriers are, where you guys think your campaign can go, like sort of the potential and the, like, you don't have to share my excitement, but you can maybe talk about it with me. But then also just like questions that you might have in terms of some of the struggles that you have, some of the questions that you have, and maybe just some ideas about what you might be able to or might not be able to do. So I'll leave it open.